Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another exciting episode of Cinemacast, right here on YouTube and on Rumble. If you do so, hit that like, hit that follow, hit that subscribe down below. Let's get into today's feature, which just came out July 2nd, and this is the seventh installment to the Jurassic Park franchise, known as Jurassic World Rebirth. Jurassic Park was such a big movie back in the day, wasn't it? I mean, this was a movie that was probably beyond its limits that anybody has ever seen. You know, you got dinosaurs that are on screen, like these dinosaurs that come to life. You get to see the T-Rex in action, raptors and all of them, interacting with people. And Jurassic Park was just a simple little film. What if one man had the thought and idea that he could bring dinosaurs back from extinction by using DNA coding, special DNA coding. And what happened? He went from turning it into a theme park sideshow, and everything just went awry with one clumsy idiot, and dinosaurs ended up roaming free on the islands down in Costa Rica, which is in South America, I believe. Down there in South America ways. But yeah, the film, it just exploded first into a trilogy. It followed The Lost World Jurassic Park, which came out in 97, and then of course Jurassic Park 3, which came out in, I think it was 2000, 2001, somewhere around there. And the movie was originally based off the book by Michael Crichton, who wrote books like Congo and such. And the books were definitely a little bit more grotesque in content, and well, at the time, you had to be a really big reader to read a hefty novel like that. I mean, the novels were very thick, and I remember getting The Lost World from, I think it wasn't Barnes and Nobles. It was some bookstore in my local mall. I remember buying it with a gift card one day when I was young, and I was sick too. I can't remember if I had the flu or something. And I remember just like reading the first few chapters of it, and I don't know. I never was really a reader, Like when it comes to movies that, like books that turn into movies, I'm like, I'm just probably one of those people that are like, I'll just wait for the movie to come out, Even though the movies, they tend to butcher a little bit of what the story is from the book. They don't really base itself completely from the book. Sometimes they'll change a name, sometimes they'll add a character, sometimes they'll rewrite this, just for the screen, just for the big screen. So if you want like the full on experience of Jurassic Park, purchase the book Jurassic Park by Michael Crichton, and the sequel, The Lost World. And of course, what followed was a ton more movies that fall into the franchise that have no meaning to the original works of Michael Crichton, but they just add on interesting stories. They bring back certain characters, they add new characters, they try to breathe new life into this franchise that just blew up out of nowhere. 1993. This was like 32 years ago. 32 years ago, Jurassic Park hit theaters, and it was still a worldwide phenomenon. People still love the original trilogy, and then of course what followed, in the early 2010s, or I think it was the early to mid 2010s, which was Jurassic World, where now it's like, okay, now they're turning the islands into theme parks. Now they got the dinosaurs under control. They turn it into a full-fledged interactive theme park for everybody to come down and spend time at. Family friendly, right? You even got Chris Pratt, who played in the new trilogy as the raptor trainer. He trained 2 raptors, Blue, and I forgot who the other ones were. But yeah, then havoc wreaks out. There's all havoc wreaks out. Dinosaurs end up breaking free. Things end up happening and such, and I can't really recall a whole lot from the new trilogy, but I will say, like, Jurassic World was probably like a repeat of Jurassic Park. It's like you catch lightning in the bottle twice. That's what Jurassic World was. And then you had two other sequels that followed that couldn't quite make the mark for the trilogy. You had Fallen Kingdom, and then you had Dominion. Now, Fallen Kingdom, they started introducing, well, they actually started introducing it in Jurassic World, but they started introducing more and more genetically mutated dinosaurs, where it's like, okay, now they're going to start breeding dinosaurs with other dinosaurs to make, hybrids. So you start introducing hybrids into the mix, and it's like, yeah, now we're definitely getting more and more into the science fiction aspect of it, like a little bit more deeper, because you're not just going with the standard, dinosaurs that everybody knows, that everybody's grown up and went to a museum and seen the bones and everything and learned about in schools. Now it's like, okay, now you got something definitely brand new, and it's definitely a way to try to make the movies a little bit more suspenseful, maybe even a little bit more terrifying in a sense to people who watch these movies. And then, of course, Dominion, which was the most recent one, well, the recent one that came out before Rebirth, was just one last hurrah to bring back some original characters such as Jeff Goldblum, Sam Neill, Laura Dern, and I forgot what the guy's name was. He was the Korean guy who was the scientist in the lab. So, they had a chance to, bring back some original characters for that movie to make it. I mean, that was the big thing for the last 5-10 years, just about, where you got an original idea, an original movie from 20, 30, 40 years ago, and you want to make a sequel or add it to the franchise, but then you want to bring back some original characters that aged, they really aged, and just bring them back for like one last hurrah. Movies like Halloween and Texas Chainsaw Massacre did it, so it's like, why not? All these big movies that turned into franchises, they're big names. Why not, right? Just bring back some original actors, the original characters for just one good movie. And of course, Dominion, which was probably the lowest rated, well, maybe the lowest rating movie out there. It was pretty low, and it has something to do with some kind of, I forgot what it was, flower or bug or something. Oh, no, it's locusts. Locusts, I'm sorry. So Dominion focused on locusts, which happened to save the environment or change the environment drastically worldwide, because they're facing extinction. You got dinosaurs roaming the world now. I mean, it was a big thing that started out back in the Lost World. You got to figure, if you go all the way back to the Jurassic Park trilogy, the Lost World, you had this group of people that were wanting the idea of bringing dinosaurs to the mainland and get them off the island. So now you got movies like Jurassic World, where it's like anything is possible. Dinosaurs can now roam free, whichever continent, wherever the habitat takes them. And that's pretty much where we're at with Rebirth. So Rebirth, which is the 7th movie in the Jurassic Park franchise, and it's also the 4th Jurassic World film. It's the 4th. Now, mind you, the Jurassic World, there was originally supposed to be just a trilogy. It was supposed to be 2 trilogies, and now you got a new one that is out, and there's supposed to be 2 other movies come out along with it. I am not too sure. They're probably going to go off of how well this movie does, but this one is a standalone sequel to the Jurassic World franchise, or the Jurassic World trilogy, so to say. So this is a standalone sequel, and usually, when people hear that and they get a little confused, it's like, I know it's a sequel to them, but what does it mean standalone? It's like, well, there is nothing canon, and there's no continuity with the previous films. You're not going to hear about Chris Pratt's character. You're not going to hear about what happened, on these islands where they created, Jurassic World, the big attraction. You're going to hear any of that. You're just going to see something brand new and refresh, and it's going to have pretty much nothing to do with the previous films, but the only thing that does take place, that is pretty canon, is just the title, Jurassic World. That's pretty much it. So let's get a little bit into the plot. Now, if you guys watched my podcast before, then you know spoilers will happen. So if you don't want to hear any spoilers, if you want to check this movie out, go watch it for yourselves and come back and watch the review. So, of course, in this one, like you see in the trailer and you see in the poster, there is a new-looking dinosaur that resembles a Tyrannosaurus Rex. And, of course, in this movie, it is heavily emphasized in certain areas that, yes, on a certain island that a group of people end up on many years ago, apparently 17 years ago, as by the story, or in this case, well, it's 2025 now, so you figure 2010, and just a little bit of it, just a little bit of synopsis. So there's a secret engine laboratory that is set on the island of Ile Saint Hubert in the Atlantic Ocean that is creating transgenetically mutated dinosaurs. One of these creatures, which is a deformed six-limbed Tyrannosaurus dubbed the Distortus Rex, escapes containment and wreaks havoc, forcing the facility personnel to abandon the island. So, yeah, you got this new dinosaur, which is genetically mutated from a T-Rex. And, of course, I'll get to it a little bit later with how I feel about this dinosaur, but this is the one that is posing in the poster. This is one that you see in the trailer, and you're like, oh my god, is that a whole new dinosaur? Like, what are they doing to these dinosaurs? It's like, okay, well, they brought dinosaurs back to life, so now they can do whatever they want to these creatures, of course, and that is, they can genetically mutate them, breed them with other dinosaurs, and see what they create. And there's quite a few dinosaurs in this film that are definitely mutated. There's even one where it's a certain bird type dinosaur that is mutated with a raptor, which is pretty cool. It is pretty cool to see a raptor with wings, basically, And I will say, like, with this story, there is it feels like a lot of feet. It's a lot of throwback to how Jurassic Park originally was, but it's definitely different in its own sense. So after this mutation takes place, and contamination, it's contained, and the facility, personnel, they all abandon the island. So you got 5 years passed since the Biosyn incident that caused a transgenic locust outbreak. The locust outbreak, which took place during Dominion. The Earth's current environment is becoming inhospitable to sustain the dinosaurs and other of the de-extinct prehistoric animal populations. So to say, you will see, like, there's dinosaurs that are roaming in different areas across the world, depending on the habitat and their living, being. However, it is noted that a lot of the more dangerous creatures and even less dangerous creatures, they tend to stay to the equator, the center of the planet, the equator of the planet. And, the weather is perfect for them. It's better habitat and all. So what is this new story about? So you have this, if I can look for it here, this archaeologist, apparently. Well, he's supposed to be an archaeologist. Well, he's a former ex-military covert op. Well, let's see here. I'm actually reading this wrong. Okay, so the surviving creatures reside in local. Okay. Then you got Zora Bennett. Who is that play? Is that played by? Okay, so Scarlett Johansson is in this film. Yes, Black Widow herself is in this movie. She plays the role of Zora Bennett, and she is a former ex-military covert op, and she is recruited by Martin Krebs of Parker Genetics, and it's a pharmaceutical company, to collaborate with a paleontologist, Dr. Henry Loomis, and team leader Duncan Kincaid on a top-secret mission to Ile Saint Hubert. Now, get this. This is something brand new. Something different to the story. You got the first movie, Jurassic Park, where it's like, okay, you got John Hammond, he had this vision, he created this park, something happens, well, everybody knows, somebody died during the incident and he's being sued. So he brings these paleontologists and scientists out to the park to deem it safe for, opening for families, making an attraction, make sure the facility's safe and all. And then, of course, things start happening. Dinosaurs end up breaking free. And then, of course, the Lost World, you have this team go in, and they want to extract a T-Rex. They want to extract dinosaurs and bring them back to the mainland for their own little attraction. And then you got Jurassic Park 3, where a hiking adventure ends up turning up Ray, where this couple's son ends up missing on the island, and they recruit Dr. Grant to follow them onto the island to retrieve their son. So the first three movies, they had a unique style to them, but they all felt almost blatantly the same in a sense, but the story was still kind of fresh. And then you got Jurassic World, which focused on, okay, now it's a big attraction and a secret. It's not a secret anymore. They want to make it like a big amusement park with dinosaurs, and then things go awry and stuff, and that follows like almost to extinction of the world, and Dominion. And of course, with this one, it gives you a fresh new story where it's like, okay, this guy who works for a pharmaceutical company, he gets his team together to go on a top secret mission to this island to retrieve biomaterial samples from the largest remaining prehistoric specimens on the island, which hold the key to the development of a medical drug capable of helping humanity. So they're hoping to retrieve blood samples, blood DNA from certain dinosaurs to create a drug that can help humanity or help heal humanity. Who knows? But then again, I see it as like maybe mutating people into dinosaurs or something. I don't know, because it's like you got something that has dino DNA in it. I could see the next movie being, okay, maybe you inject that dino DNA into humans and creating super soldiers. You got people walking around with claws and big ass teeth, big ass heads mutating. I can only see that now. So basically, that is most of what the story is. You got this team that are sailing out there, and they're trying to retrieve, blood samples from 3 different dinosaurs that they come across. And of course, along the way, there is this family who is out vacationing on the Atlantic Ocean and ends up coming across one of the dangerous dinosaurs in the water. Who overturns their boat, and they do a mayday call. And of course, this group comes and picks them up, saves them. And it just becomes one big fiasco as they land on the island. They end up crashing on the island, and they end up separating from each other. So you got 2 groups of people that are doing 2 completely different things. So it's a back and forth thing. You gotta, you go to the group of people that are trying to retrieve these samples, and you go back to the family that's trying to find a way out. Either or, it's 2 separate stories. You follow, 2 separate groups of people. And along the way, you do have some slightly intense scenes where they come across certain dinosaurs, and it leads to like either somebody gets eaten or hurt, or somebody almost barely gets eaten, and it turns out, just like, oh no, they're still fine, they're alive. But you also do see some throwback creatures. You do get to see the T-Rex in 1 or 2 scenes. There is a brief scene where you see the Dilophosaurus sitting there for just a brief moment. The Dilophosaurus that killed what's his name, Nedry in Jurassic Park. Yeah, you get to see him for a little bit. There's a scene where you see some compies, or look like there's some compies in there from the Lost World, but not for too long. And I will say that the CG effects on the dinosaurs, I just gotta say, computer generated graphic design, CGI, I think it's wearing thin. It really is wearing thin. You got to figure, like, back in 1993, you might have had some CG effects in a sense, but you also had models. You had Stan Winston that was working on the animations and the modeling for the dinosaurs and such. So that was what made those movies so realistic. so great to watch. You know, it's you're not reliant on anything that's computer generated. That's what made the first few movies great. And now, you know, with AI technology, with, you know, CGI technology, it taken over, everything just, it might as well be a cartoon at this point. It might as well be a cartoon when it comes to animating certain creatures or whatever it is to the screen. But yeah, so, you know, both groups end up meeting up with each other in the end on the island, trying to make the grand escape from which the last scene is basically these reptar pterosaur hybrids called mutadons, which they're pretty cool looking. You know, you got a good scene with these metadons, you know, and just looking at it, I was like, wow, this is definitely something new. And then of course you do have just a few brief moments with the Distortus Rex, you know, which is the hybrid T-Rex, but not very, very long. But you do have a couple terrifying scenes, probably to those who feel terrified with this movie. And of course, you know, the groups, they end up making their way off the island, and it just feels kind of reminiscent back to Jurassic Park in a way. You know, it's like there's just some things about this movie, it just has a little bit of throwback to the original in certain scenes. Especially there's one scene where it takes place in this abandoned gas station where they're trying to hide from these mutadons, and one of them is inside the gas station store, you know, seeking this little girl. You know, she's hiding in a freezer, and, you know, she's trying to get out with her family. And then of course, you know, you got the very end where they're on a boat, almost reminiscent to the, you know, the cast in the helicopter at the end of Jurassic Park, where they're flying over the ocean and they see the animals out in the sea, and then, you know, the song plays, and that's that, you know, that kind of thing. So for a movie that it's standalone, I feel like Rebirth is almost kind of like a soft reboot on the entire franchise, because you got to see, like, the last two movies, Fallen Kingdom and Dominion, they definitely fell hard. Like, I don't know if they were trying to rush it in a sense to where, we just want to get it out there. We want to get it out there, you know, back to back to back. And it's like, it's almost like this is a breath of fresh air, but I think the franchise may have staled just a little bit. I mean, now we're going into territories where it's like, okay, now we're finding new islands. You know, apparently, like, throughout the whole franchise, there's different islands that they've been experimenting with dinosaurs on. And of course, you got one that, they've been experimenting, you know, mutating dinosaurs, crossbreeding genes, you know, that kind of thing. So now you got to bring that into the mix. And basically, this turns away from being a dinosaur-based film. It's turning into a creature feature, a big monster creature feature. And you know what? There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with that. Like, you know, since the 30s, 40s, 50s, or whatever, we've had monster features. You know, we've had creature features. How many Godzilla movies are out there in Japan? You know, there's like, what, 15, 20 Godzilla movies between Japan and US. And, you know, they're all creature features. They're monster movies, and that's pretty much like what Jurassic World is at this point in time. Where right now I feel like Jurassic World is almost more like becoming a series, kind of like The Walking Dead. Where if you heard in my last review of 28 years later, it's almost like with this movie, Jurassic Park, where the dinosaurs were the forefront of everything, it's almost like they're kind of just the backstory. Now it's just more focused more on the dramatic scenes with these characters and what they're trying to do and why they're doing it. And of course, you know, their interactions with the monsters, you know, with the dinosaurs is always something in these movies. But that's where I feel like they, you know, this is just a movie where it takes the name and tries to make a big buck off of it, and then introduce something new, something spectacular that they feel like, this is going to be a breath of fresh air, Rebirth, it's a soft reboot kind of. But in the end, for me, I feel like this movie, it's trying too much to be something different. And it does, don't get me wrong, it does try to be something different, and it is in a sense, but also falls short, especially when there's not a whole lot of action going on with the dinosaurs at all. It's just, just a group of people trying to get out, trying to survive without getting eaten or killed, basically. And I even seen one comment, somebody said, "Oh, this was disappointing. There's no big dinosaur fights. There's no big fights or brawls going on." I was like, well, this is something a little bit different. It's definitely a little bit. This one is more story driven, which is where I think movies of these franchises are trying to lean a little bit more toward, is to tell a story, to get a story across to the viewer, rather than deliver something that they have come to see, that they've enjoyed for so long. So right now, the reviews on this movie on Rotten Tomatoes is 53%. Out of 184 critics, reviews are positive. The website's consensus reads that Jurassic World Rebirth, going back to basics with rip-roaring set pieces and fossilized cliches, Rebirth doesn't evolve the prehistoric franchise, but it does restore some of the most reliable DNA, which is pretty important to a good movie. Like, when you go to a movie like this, what do you go for? Do you go for the plot and the story? Do you go to see characters, doing what they're doing, or do you just go to see dinosaurs eating people? Or people have different fetishes when it comes to certain movies. Like, when you watch the Saw franchise, do you watch Saw for the story, or do you watch it just to watch people die by the traps? That's pretty much how these movies are. Peter DeBruge from Variety admitted that Rebirth offers an updated version of the same basic ride Spielberg offered 32 years earlier, and yet it hardly feels essential to the series' overall mythology, nor does it signal where the franchise could be headed. And you know what? That is true. That is true. Like, right now, the way the movie ends, it almost looks like it ends on bookends. It's like it's got bookends, like, from start to finish with this film. Like I said, it's a standalone sequel to the Jurassic World trilogy, but also the way it ends, the way it comes to an end, it's like, okay, this is definitely something totally different. I mean, do they end up doing this in the end? Do they, you never know. You never know, unless they decide to do a sequel and say, okay, will that carry on into how this film ended? We won't know. Let's see. Christy Lemire of RogerEbert.com, here we go with Roger Ebert, wrote that there are some sporadic joys here in the clever sight gags, the sleight of hand, the bait and switch. These moments remind us of the mindless summertime excitement that Jurassic movies have long provided, albeit with diminishing returns, but that giant footprint just isn't as imposing as it used to be. And then Chris Bumbray of JoeBlow.com, okay, wrote that one of the summer's biggest disappointments, Jurassic World Rebirth, might finally prove that this franchise is in need of a long break. And you know what? I really do agree, because Jurassic World seemed to, have movies come out every 2, 3, 4 years apart from each other. And Dominion came out back in, 2022, 2023, somewhere around there. And here we are with Rebirth. So it's almost like maybe they should put the franchise to rest for a little bit, and just think of some ideas of how they can if they want to give it another refresher, you know? And one more review. We got Megan from Bloody Disgusting, who wrote Jurassic World Rebirth takes a step in the right direction, but the previous trilogy backed this franchise so thoroughly into a corner that it might be time to just let the series go extinct. That's another true thought right there with Jurassic World. The previous trilogy, the way it just went from great to heavily disappointing within 3 movies, it's almost like, why did they even bother to do another film for the franchise? Or better yet, why did they even bother using the Jurassic World title? They could have went back to saying Jurassic Park, or they could have did something else. I don't know. I couldn't think of a name for the franchise at this point. But this is the path that they chose. They chose it, and I feel like they did it well with the story. But like I said, it does fall short for some fans. It'll probably fall short for a lot more people who are dying to see this film, who are dying to get out there and check it out. Is it a big disappointment for the summer? I can't tell you that. I can only say that I watched this movie. I did enjoy it. Yes, there are a few flaws with the plot. There's a few flaws with the story. And I will say this movie clocks in 133 minutes. This movie's just over 2 hours. So if I go back and check out, let's see, Jurassic World. Well, let's see. So Jurassic Park was 127 minutes. Okay, so that is just around 2 hours right there. The Lost World, 120, 2 minutes longer than that. Okay, Jurassic World 3. Jurassic World 3 is probably the shortest film in the franchise, clocking in at 92 minutes. Jurassic World, 124 minutes. Okay, they're about the same. Fallen Kingdom, 128 minutes. And Dominion. Okay, so Dominion was actually the longest of the franchise at 147 minutes. Or if you get the extended cut, 161 minutes. So Dominion was 2.5 hours, basically. 2.5, close to 3 hours, maybe. And then you got Rebirth, that is 133 minutes, which is, 2 hours and 7 minutes. So I guess the longest in the franchise is Dominion, but yet Dominion is probably the weakest of them all. Dominion's got a review rate of 29% on it. And I think what didn't really help matters much with it is the fact that COVID-19 played a tentacle part, it played a big role with the movie's release and such. And of course, it made Dominion the most expensive film that they ever made, of course. And then you got Rebirth, which, of course, the whole pandemic is done and over with. So, they pretty much picked up where they left off with Dominion. So, like I said, this movie, CG effects of the dinosaurs, not all that spectacular. It is what it is for a big creature feature. Is it pretty cool to see some of these mutated dinosaurs, like, the mutated T-Rex, or even the raptors mutated into these, what were they called? Pterosaurus. Yeah, the Pterosaurus, which is a bird. So, it is pretty cool to see, something new, something original a little bit, just to add to the mixture of what can possibly make this a great franchise once again. But like I said, when it seems like a franchise is running out of steam, I think that's when it's about time to hang it up. Because look at franchises that have been out since the 70s and 80s. How many Halloweens do we got? Friday the 13th, Nightmare on Elm Street, Texas Chainsaw Massacres. Like, how many do we got until you get up there and some of them are just downright terrible, But they are still enjoyable to the audiences. People love them, and as long as people still pay out money to see them, hey, these movies are here to stay. What rating do I give Jurassic World? I will give Jurassic World Rebirth an honest 7 out of 10. I did enjoy the story. I did enjoy seeing something new, a little bit of breath of fresh air. It's definitely good not to see Chris Pratt trying to pull a fucking Vin Diesel in this movie like he did with the last three. You know, you got a new cast, you got a whole new, you know, star cast in here. Of course, you got Scarlett Johansson in there, you know, trying to make her dollar off of it. But then you got all these new actors who I haven't never seen. You know, I don't know who they are, Stewie. But it's definitely something new. It's something fresh. It's a fresh breath. It's a breath of fresh air to see something different. But it still falls in line with how the rest of the franchise has gone. Now, like I said, that I know some people who thought the ending was pretty bullshit. I didn't think the ending was bullshit. I think it ended pretty well the same way that Jurassic Park ended. So this could be just a standalone. This could be the last one they do. We won't know for sure. So that does it for today's review, you guys. Thank you for coming in. Thank you for checking out today's podcast. Did you guys see Jurassic World Rebirth? What did you think about this movie? Leave us a comment right down below what you think. And also on your way out, hit that like, hit that subscribe, hit that follow button, guys. Our social medias and all our streaming sites are down below in the description section. Today's feature was Jurassic World Rebirth. Thank you guys for checking it out today. And until next time, catch you right back here at the cinema.